The reflection on the microwave door isn't just a blur to me. My daughter thinks 69 years have made my vision cloudy and my mind slow. She's wrong. I saw that little blue glass vial perfectly clear in her trembling hands. I saw the liquid drip into my pumpkin soup. And when she turned to grab a spoon, as a father who had just paid off $50,000 of his child's debt, I did the only thing I could. I swapped the bowls. You won't believe what happened next. But before I tell you how my own flesh and blood ended up gasping on the floor, tell me in the comments where you're watching this from. If you've ever had to teach an ungrateful family member a lesson they'll never forget, hit that like button and subscribe. The Chicago winter wind was howling against the kitchen window, rattling the frames. But the chill inside the house was much worse. I sat at the head of the mahogany table, the spot I've occupied for 40 years. My hands were folded on the tablecloth. To anyone else, I was just Harold King, a retired chemistry professor, maybe a bit slow, maybe a bit lonely since my wife passed. But my mind is still as sharp as the scalpels I used in the lab. I watched Rebecca, my only daughter. For 32 years, I told myself she was my pride and joy. Right now, she was standing by the kitchen island back to me. The stainless steel microwave above the stove acts like a perfect mirror. She didn't know that. She was struggling to keep her hand steady. I watched her pull a small vial from her cardigan pocket. No label. The liquid inside was a pale, innocent blue. She pulled the stopper with a sharp, jerky movement. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, just a fraction. I held my breath and prayed to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. I hoped she would stop. I hoped she would remember the joy of riding ponies, the college tuition I paid in full, or the $50,000 check I wrote just last week to cover the debts she and her husband, Todd, racked up on luxury goods and vacations they couldn't afford. She didn't stop. She tilted the bottle. 3 drops, 4 or 5, into that steaming bowl of pumpkin soup, my favorite. She stirred it quickly, the metal spoon clicking against the ceramic. That sound, that gentle clink, was the sound of my heart breaking. It was the sound of the bond between father and daughter being severed. She turned to the sink to rinse the spoon. Now. I didn't stand up and I didn't scream. Years of handling volatile chemicals taught me that panic leads to explosions, but precision prevents them. I leaned forward. My movements were silent. My left hand took my bowl, my right hand took hers. I slid them across the polished wood. Friction made almost no sound. The swap was done. It took 3 seconds. When she turned around, drying her hands on a towel, I was sitting just as before. Hands folded, staring blankly at the snow piling up in the backyard. My heart was pounding like a trapped bird against my ribs, but my face was calm as glass. Just then Todd walked in, my son-in-law. He was wearing that cheap cologne he insists is imported. He rubbed his hands together, bringing a gust of biting cold in from the garage. "Smells great, Becca," he said, too loud, too chipper. He walked over and patted my shoulder. That hand felt heavy like a shackle. "How are you feeling tonight, Harold?" "Ready for some hot soup?" I looked up at him. I saw a bead of sweat on his upper lip. The house was only 68 degrees. Why was he sweating? I knew why. Because he's a failing real estate agent with a gambling habit I wasn't supposed to know about, and because he was likely the one who got that little blue bottle. "I'm hungry, Todd," I said, my voice sounding raspy. "Good," I played my part. The old man, the prey, Rebecca brought the bowls over. She put one in front of me, the clean one. She put the other in front of her own seat, the toxic one. "Sit, Dad," she said, her voice tight. "Eat while it's hot." She sat across from me. Todd sat at the other end. A triangle of betrayal. I picked up my spoon. I saw them both tense up. Todd's movement pulling out his chair stopped in midair. Rebecca's eyes were locked on my hands. They were waiting. They were waiting for the old man to eat his medicine. I dipped the spoon into the thick orange liquid. I brought it to my lips. I blew on it gently. I could feel their eyes burning into me. I took a sip. Delicious, I said. I saw Todd exhale. His shoulders sank with relief. Rebecca squeezed out a smile, but it looked more like a painful grimace. Glad you like it, Dad, she said. She picked up her own spoon. I watched her. I watched the woman I had taught to ride a bike. The woman I had taught the periodic table. I remembered a Tuesday afternoon when she was 10. She asked, Dad, what happens if you mix bleach and ammonia? I made her sit down and explain the chemistry, the gas, the way it burns the lungs. I taught her that chemistry is fair to everyone and it shows no mercy. It's cause and effect. Action and reaction. If you introduce a foreign agent into a system, the system responds. And now she was introducing an agent into her own system. She took a big spoonful of soup and swallowed. Eat more, Rebecca, I said softly. You need your strength. We ate in silence for the first few minutes. The only sound was the scraping of spoons against the bowls. I ate slowly, savoring the soup that was meant to be my last meal. It tasted like nutmeg and cream. It tasted like survival. Todd ate fast, wolfing it down as if he just wanted to get it over with. He kept glancing at me, then at his watch. So, Harold, Todd said, chewing with his mouth full. Rebecca and I have been talking. We think the maintenance on the house is too much. It's too much stress for you, isn't it? The shoveling, the roof repairs. There it was, the trap was sprung. That's kind, Todd, I said, wiping my mouth with a napkin. I can manage. But can you really? Rebecca jumped in, putting down her spoon. Dad, you left the garage door open last night, and you forgot the water bill last week. We're just worried. I hadn't forgotten the water bill. I'd mailed the check on Monday. As for the garage door, Todd has the code. To gaslight me, he'd likely opened it himself. I'm fine, I repeated. Maybe, Todd leaned in, but we found a great facility outside of town, assisted living. We think it's time to take a look, just to look. I looked at Rebecca. She was about to take another bite. Is this what you want, Becca? I asked. You want to put me in a home? She swallowed the soup. It's for your own good, Dad. We just want you safe. Safe, the word hung in the air, heavy with irony. Suddenly, Rebecca frowned. She dropped her spoon. It clattered against the bowl. She reached for her throat. What's wrong? Todd asked, looking at her. I don't know, she whispered. Her voice sounded thick. It's a little bitter. Must be too much sage, I said calmly. I took another sip of my soup. I think it tastes great. She started to cough, a dry cough. She rubbed her chest. It's so hot in here, she said. Is the heat cranked up? She pushed her chair back. Her face was pale. The color drained from her skin faster than I'd ever seen. Digitalis, it had to be. I recognized the symptoms. I was a chemist, after all, foxglove extract. It causes nausea, vomiting, then heart arrhythmias. At high doses, it stops the heart. The symptoms mimic a heart attack, the perfect weapon to kill an old man with high blood pressure. But Rebecca's heart was strong and her metabolism was faster. The poison was affecting her differently. My vision, she stammered. She blinked rapidly. It's a bit blurry. There are halos around the lights. Todd stood up. Becca, are you okay? I feel so sick. She gagged, hunched over, and clutched her stomach. Oh, God. I sat motionless. I watched this chemistry experiment unfold. Todd rushed to her side. What is it? Is it the flu? She suddenly vomited violently on the floor. I stood up then, but I moved slowly like the old man they thought I was. Oh my, I said. Dad, help me, Todd shouted. She's burning up. He touched her forehead. She was convulsing now, her body stiffening in the chair. She slid down and hit the floor with a thud. This isn't the flu, I said, my voice cold. Todd looked at me, his eyes full of panic. What? This looks like some kind of reaction, I said. What did you put in the soup, Todd? He froze instantly. The mask was ripped off. I saw the fear of a man trapped in his own snare. We didn't put anything in it. What are you talking about? She's been poisoned, Todd, I said. Unless you want to watch her pass away on this kitchen floor, call 911 immediately. He scrambled for his phone, his fingers fumbling on the screen. Rebecca was gasping for air. Her eyes were rolling back. Her hands were clawing at the linoleum. She looked at me. In that moment of absolute pain, a flicker of clarity returned to her eyes. She looked at me, then at the empty bowl in front of her, then at the full one in front of me. She understood. "Dad," she gasped. "Don't try to talk, dear," I said, kneeling beside her. I didn't touch her, I just leaned in close. "Save your energy. You're going to need it to explain all this to the police." Todd was screaming into the phone. "Yes, my wife. She's having a seizure. I don't know, she just had dinner." When he turned away, I saw it. When Rebecca fell, a tissue had slipped out of her pocket. Wrapped inside was the empty glass vial. She hadn't thrown it away, she'd kept it on her. How amateur. I reached out and palmed the tissue. I slipped it into my cardigan pocket. Exhibit A. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance. We lived close to the station. Todd was kneeling beside her, crying now. Maybe they were real tears. Maybe he was crying for himself because he knew his plan had completely unraveled. "She's going to be okay, right? Harold, she has to be okay." I stood up and looked down at them, a greedy daughter and a desperate husband. "I don't know, Todd," I said. "That depends on the dosage." He snapped his head up. "Dosage?" I didn't answer. I walked to the window and watched the red lights of the ambulance flashing on the snow. They were here to save her for now. But the real poison in this house wasn't in the soup, and I had just initiated the procedure to clear it out. Paramedics rushed in. The kitchen was a mess, the vomiting, the spilled soup. They loaded her onto a stretcher. "Sir, are you coming?" the paramedic asked Todd. Yes, of course." He looked at me. "Dad, are you coming?" I looked at the chaos on the floor. "I'll drive myself," I said. "I need to grab a coat." They pushed her out in a hurry. The door slammed. The kitchen fell into dead silence. I went to the sink, took my bowl of soup, poured the rest down the drain, and flipped the switch on the garbage disposal. The proof of my survival vanished in a roar. I reached into my pocket and took out the tissue with the vial. I held it up to the light. There was one last drop of blue liquid at the bottom. I walked to the hallway closet, put on my heavy wool coat, and grabbed my hat. I looked at myself in the hallway mirror. I didn't look like a victim. I didn't look like a frail old man. I looked like a man who had just declared war. I walked out into the cold Chicago night, the snow crunching under my feet. I wasn't just going to the hospital to visit my daughter. I was going to finish what they had started. As I drove toward the hospital, the city lights streaking past the windows, my phone buzzed. It was my lawyer, Leonard Banks. I'd sent him a coded text while the paramedics were busy. Digitalis. "Harold," Leonard's voice was low and gravelly. "You triggered the protocol. Is it done?" "They made their move tonight, Leonard," I said, eyes on the icy road. "Digitalis in the soup." "Good heavens," Leonard gasped. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." Rebecca ate it. A long silence followed on the other end. Leonard Banks is the only person who knows my true net worth. He knows I made $15 million selling a pharmaceutical patent 5 years ago. He knows I've been playing the part of a middle-class retiree to test my family. He knows the results of that test now. They failed. "She ate it?" Leonard asked. I swapped the plates. "Harold, this is complicated." "It's self-defense," I said. "Now listen, I'm on my way to Mercy Hospital. Todd will try to spin this. He'll say I have dementia. He'll say I mixed up the ingredients. He'll try to file for guardianship tonight." "I'll meet you there," Leonard said. "I'll bring the files. We freeze everything." "Everything," I said. "Joint accounts, credit cards, mortgages. I want them to feel the cold, Leonard. I want them to know what it's like to have nothing." I hung up. I pulled into the hospital parking lot. I could see Todd pacing at the emergency entrance. He was on the phone again, probably calling his bookie or a lawyer. I killed the engine and sat in the dark for a moment. I remembered the little girl who used to hold my hand tight when we crossed the street. That girl is gone. In her place is a stranger who would poison her own father for an inheritance. I got out and walked toward the automatic doors. My daughter thought I hadn't seen her, but I'd seen everything. And tonight, everyone else would see it too. The pungent smell of disinfectant in the ER burned my nose, a sharp contrast to the winter cold I'd left outside. I sat on the edge of a hard plastic chair, pulling my coat tight, eyes fixed on the double doors they'd wheeled Rebecca through. Todd was pacing in front of the nurse's station, his soles squeaking on the linoleum. He was acting, grabbing his hair, demanding updates, playing the part of a terrified husband to perfection. But I saw his eyes darting around the room, checking for exits, watching the police officers who had just arrived. He wasn't afraid for his wife. He was calculating his odds of getting away with it. A doctor pushed through those spring-loaded doors. He looked exhausted, his scrubs wrinkled. His badge read *doctor, Patel *. He scanned the waiting area, his eyes landing on us. Todd rushed him before he could catch his breath. "Is she alive?" Todd yelled, grabbing the doctor's arm. "Tell me she's alive." "She's stable, Mr. King," the doctor said gently, pulling his arm away. "But it's very dangerous. We've identified the toxin. It's digitalis, and it's a massive overdose." The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Digitalis, foxglove, a common garden plant, beautiful but lethal. A plant that I, Harold King, a retired chemistry professor with a passion for botany, had growing in my own greenhouse. Todd froze. For a split second, I saw the gears in his head turning. He had expected the doctor to say food poisoning or an allergic reaction. He hadn't expected them to identify the specific toxin so quickly. But Todd is a man who will do anything to survive, a cockroach that thrives in the dark, and his reaction was faster than I imagined. He turned and pointed a trembling finger straight at my face. "It was him," Todd screamed, his voice laced with fake hysteria. "It was this old man." The two officers at the entrance stepped forward, hands hovering near their belts. The room went quiet. Nurses, patients with broken bones, patients with fevers. Everyone turned to stare at the white-haired man huddled in his coat. "What are you saying, sir?" one of the officers asked, stepping between Todd and me. "He grows that stuff," Todd yelled, spit flying. "He has weird plants all over the yard. Foxglove. He grows foxglove. He makes those teas, those herbal remedies, because he doesn't believe in modern medicine." He glared at me with frantic eyes. "You did it, Harold. You mixed up the jars again, didn't you? You put the poison in the soup, thinking it was parsley or some weed." The officer turned to me. His expression wasn't accusatory yet, but it was wary. "Sir, do you grow foxglove?" This was the moment, the fork in the road. I could have stood up straight, told them I was of sound mind, and just foiled a murder plot. I could have told them about the debts, the swapped soup bowls, and the blue vial in my pocket. But if I did that now, it would become a messy family dispute. Todd would hire a lawyer. He would hide the money. He would claim I was suffering from delusions. No, I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to think they'd won. I needed to be the prey so they wouldn't see the bear trap closing around their ankles. I let my shoulders slump. I let my hands start to tremble, shaking enough that you could see the coat buttons rattling. I opened my eyes wide, filling them with that watery, bewildered confusion of an old man. I don't know," I stammered, my voice weak and shaking. "I have a garden. Yes, I dry herbs for tea or seasonings." "See," Todd shouted triumphantly. "He admits it. He's losing his mind, officer. He's been forgetful for months. Forgetting to turn off the stove, forgetting people's names, wandering around. I told him not to cook anymore. I told him it was dangerous." I looked down at my hands, playing the part of a shameful, confused father. I thought it was Basil," I whispered at a volume just loud enough for the officer to hear. "Those jars, they look so much alike. My eyes aren't what they used to be. Oh God, did I hurt Becca?" The officer's posture softened immediately. He wasn't looking at a murderer. He was looking at a tragedy. He saw a poor, confused old man who had made a terrible mistake. He looked at Todd with sympathy. "Sir, it sounds like an accident," the officer said. "A terrible accident." "An accident?" Todd asked sharply, but I could see the relief in his eyes. He'd found his way out. He didn't have to go to prison for attempted murder. He could blame my declining brain. It was perfect for him, even better than perfect. It paved the way for his guardianship. "He almost killed my wife," Todd screamed, squeezing out tears. "He's dangerous now. He can't be left alone. We've been trying to help him, trying to get him into a home, but he refused." I buried my face in my hands and sobbed. It wasn't hard to cry. I was crying for the daughter who sat at my dinner table, watching me eat poison, waiting for me to die. "I'm so sorry," I wailed. "I've been so confused lately. I just wanted to make a nice dinner." The doctor looked uncomfortable. "Mr. King, digitalis poisoning is very specific. We need to know exactly how much was in the food to treat her effectively. Do you still have the plant remnants?" I threw it away," I stuttered. "Put it in the garbage disposal. I cleaned up. I wanted the kitchen to be clean." Todd shook his head, looking at the officer with a pleading expression. "See, he destroyed the evidence because he didn't even realize what he was doing. We can't let him back into that house alone. He's a threat to himself and others." The officer nodded slowly. "Sir, we may need to ask you a few more questions, but for now, I need to sit down," I said, clutching my chest and gasping. "I feel dizzy." "Nurse!" the officer shouted. They helped me into a wheelchair. As they wheeled me away from the waiting room, I glanced back at Todd. He was wiping his face with a handkerchief, talking quickly to another officer. He looked grief-stricken. But the moment the automatic doors slid shut between us, I saw it. A tiny, fleeting smirk. He thought he'd done it. He thought he'd turned a botched murder into a golden ticket to control my life and my wealth. He didn't know that on the glass vial I had wrapped in a tissue in my pocket, his wife's fingerprints were still there. He didn't know that while he was shouting about my fading memory, I was recording every word he said to use against him in court. He thought I was a demented old man losing his grasp on reality. He had no idea he was staring into the eyes of a chemist who was just waiting for the reaction to reach the boiling point. I let them wheel me into an exam room. I let them check my vitals. I waited for the darkness to fall so I could make my next move. The game had changed, and Todd had perfectly played his hand right into my trap. The nurse left me alone in the exam room, the door clicking shut like a starting pistol. She left me with a warm blanket and that pitying smile reserved for confused old men. The moment the lock clicked, the tremor in my hand disappeared. My back straightened, shedding 20 years of weight. I wasn't that frail old man in the wheelchair anymore. I was the man who had negotiated with pharmaceutical giants and walked away with a fortune. I stood up, walked to the door, and pressed my ear to the cold wood. I could hear the frantic rhythm of the ER outside, the squeak of rubber soles, the steady beeps of the monitors, the low complaints of worried family members. Todd must have been pacing, likely rehearsing his lines about my dementia or calling his creditors to promise them the money. He had no idea that the countdown for his own life had begun, not mine. I pushed the door open a crack. It was clear. I slipped out, walking with a light, swift step. I ducked into a restroom near the nurse's station and locked the door. Overhead, the fluorescent lights buzzed, casting a harsh, cold light on the white tile. I turned on the faucet to mask my voice, a habit learned from years of negotiating in rooms with thin walls. I pulled a phone from my inner coat pocket. Not the senior flip phone Todd insisted I use. This was a high-end, encrypted smartphone that held the keys to a kingdom of wealth my family didn't even know existed. I dialed a number I'd had memorized for 10 years. It rang once, and Leonard Banks answered. He didn't say hello. He just asked status. "They took the bait, Leonard," I said, my voice steady, staring at myself in the mirror. The old man in the glass looked exhausted, red-eyed, but the soul behind those eyes was cold and calculating. Todd is spinning a story. He's accusing me of dementia. He claims I mistook foxglove for an herb. He's laying the groundwork for an emergency guardianship hearing. Excellent, Leonard replied, the sound of papers rustling in the background. As predicted, if they file for guardianship, they'll have to submit to an asset investigation. We can subpoena their financial records to prove motive. Exactly, I said. But we need to accelerate the pressure. They're desperate, Leonard. Todd's gambling debts are driving him insane. He's desperate for liquid cash. That's why they were in such a hurry to poison me. If they think they've won, if they think I'm about to be locked away, they'll try to move the money in the accounts immediately. Let them try, Leonard chuckled. They think they're smashing open a piggy bank. They have no idea they're trying to pry open Fort Knox. That's why I'm calling. I leaned closer to the mirror. It's time to bring the curtain down. For 40 years, I let them think I was just a regular high school chemistry teacher on a meager pension, living in a house with a paid-off mortgage. I let them think my savings came from clipping coupons. I never told them about the patents. I never told them that the hydrophobic polymer coating I spent endless nights synthesizing in my garage lab is now used on every surgical instrument in the country. I never told them I sold the rights to that patent for $12 million 15 years ago. I kept the secret because I wanted to know if they loved me or my wallet. Tonight I got the answer. Execute the Aegis protocol, I ordered. There was a pause on the other end, a heavy silence that carried the weight of total financial war. Aegis was the nuclear option, a contingency plan we designed years ago for a worst-case scenario I'd prayed I'd never use. Are you sure, Harold? Leonard asked, his voice losing its usual professional calm. Once we do this, there's no going back. It freezes everything. The joint checking accounts you share with Rebecca, the credit cards you authorized Todd to use, the mortgage payments you've been subsidizing, the monthly allowance. Everything gets cut off. I'm sure, I said, my voice hard. They tried to kill me, Leonard. They watched me eat the poison and smiled. I want every card they swipe to be declined. I want every ATM to spit their cards out. I want their phones to be flooded with foreclosure warnings. I want them to feel the walls closing in. I want them to feel how helpless they wanted me to be. Understood, Leonard said. I'm initiating the lockdown now. By the time you step out of that restroom, they will be destitute. The only money they'll have is the loose change in their pockets. And Leonard, I added, watching a drop of water fall from the tap, flag the accounts for fraud. If they try to move any funds, have the bank notify the police. Make it look like an automatic security response. I want them paranoid. I want them turning on each other. Consider it done, Leonard said. Keep playing the part, Harold. The next 24 hours will be very volatile. I hung up and slid the phone into my pocket. I took one last look in the mirror. I messed up my hair to make it look disheveled. I slumped my shoulders, bending my back into the arc of a beaten old man. I practiced the vacant stare and the trembling lip. I turned off the faucet. Silence returned. I unlocked the door and stepped back into the hallway, shuffling, looking lost and small. Deep inside, the chemist was mixing the final ingredients for an explosion. But to everyone else, I was just a confused father who couldn't find his room. I walked back to the exam area, ready for the next act. Because I knew that in a server room a few miles away, my real power had just come online, and my family was about to find out that the man they tried to bury was the only thing keeping their lives afloat. I slumped back into the uncomfortable vinyl chair in the hospital waiting room, chin heavy on my chest, breathing in shallow, rhythmic spurts. To the passing nurses and the tired janitors mopping the floor, I was just another old man worn down by the night's trauma. A father who nearly lost his daughter to a horrific accident. But beneath the shadow of my hat, my eyes were squinted into a sliver. my ears tuned to the frequency that only someone as desperate as Todd could emit. Todd was pacing near the vending machine a few yards away. He was shaking so hard from anxiety that his movements were jerky and uncoordinated. He kept checking his phone, the screen's light illuminating his pale, sweat-drenched face in the dim corridor. He looked like a trapped beast, and I knew exactly why. The poison hadn't worked. The police hadn't arrested me, and now the silence on his end was about to be broken by people he feared more than the law. His phone buzzed. Not a ring. A harsh, angry vibration against his leg. Todd jumped like he'd been electrocuted. He fumbled to pull the phone from his pocket, nearly dropping it on the linoleum. He looked at the screen, and I saw the color drain from his face until he looked like a standing corpse. He didn't answer right away. He looked around, his eyes sweeping over the empty chairs, the sleeping relatives, and finally landing on me. I let out a soft snore and shifted my weight slightly, appearing to fall into a deeper sleep. Convinced his audience was unconscious, Todd answered. He didn't say hello. He just hissed a frantic, low-voiced whisper, clearly audible in the dead-quiet hallway. "I know what time it is, I know." He turned his back to me, hunching his shoulders as if trying to shrink until he disappeared. "Please, you have to listen." There was a complication, a medical complication. No, not me, it's the asset. I almost laughed out loud. The asset. That was all that remained of 40 years of father-child connection. I wasn't a person. I wasn't a father-in-law. I was an asset to be liquidated. Todd listened for a moment, then began to shake violently. He gripped the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. "No, please, don't touch her. She's in the hospital. We're at Mercy Hospital." He listened some more. 500,000. Yes, $500,000. I know the number. I swear to you, the money will be there. It's tied up in probate. Well, it was asterisk supposed to be probate. A long pause followed. Todd reached up to touch his left hand, his thumb stroking his wedding ring. 7 days, that's not enough time. He stopped. He was clearly hearing a description of some kind of violence I could only imagine, but Todd's reaction said everything. He pulled his hand away from his face as if he'd been burned. Fine. 7 days or the fingers go, I understand. I'll get the money. I swear on my mother's life I'll get it. Just don't come here." He hung up. He stood frozen by the vending machine for a long time, his chest heaving. $500,000. $500,000. That was the price tag on my life. That was the debt he'd racked up from gambling on futures he didn't understand and horses that weren't fast enough. I knew he was terrible with money. Last week, I'd filled a $50,000 hole for him, but I hadn't known he'd dug a grave that deep. Todd wiped his face with his sleeve, took a shaky breath, and turned toward the recovery room. He needed to talk to his accomplice. He needed a new strategy because the murder had failed and the sharks were already circling, smelling blood. I waited until he pushed through the double doors leading to the ward. I counted to 10. Then I stood up. My joints popped, real signs of age, but my movements were fluid. I followed. I moved through the hallway, hugging the shadows, my footsteps silent. I saw him slip into room 304. The door wasn't fully closed. A crack of just a fraction of an inch remained. I pressed my back against the wall next to the doorframe, closed my eyes, and focused every ounce of my attention on the voices inside. Rebecca was awake. Her voice was raspy, weak, stripped of the honeyed mask she used to handle me. "You look terrible, Todd," she said. Called," Todd whispered. The panic was back in his voice, raw and unveiled. "He gave us a week. 7 days, Becca, or he starts sending my pieces back one by one." Rebecca let out a low groan. "I hate him. I hate the old man. Why isn't he dead yet, Todd? I put enough digitalis in that soup to kill a horse. He ate it. I watched him eat it." "He must have a stomach like a goat," Todd spat. "Or maybe the dosage was wrong." "It doesn't matter now. Plan A is a bust. The police are already asking about the garden. If we try anything physical, they'll be watching us. So what do we do? Rebecca asked, sounding hysterical. We can't wait for him to die naturally. We don't have years. We only have a week. Todd paced the small room. I could hear his shoes dragging against the floor. We change tactics, he said. We go to Plan B, we force the issue. Plan B? Rebecca asked. You mean the nursing home? No, not just a nursing home, Todd said, his voice dropping, becoming more sinister. Absolute conservatorship, total legal control. We don't need him to die to get the money, Becca. We just need him declared incompetent. But the doctor, Dr. Patel said he seemed clear-headed, Rebecca countered. Dr. Patel doesn't know him, Todd snapped. Look at what happened tonight. He poisoned his own daughter because he mixed up parsley and foxglove. That's what the police report will say. That's the reality. He's dangerous. He's senile. He's a threat to himself and others. I held my breath. They were rewriting reality. They were turning my survival into a weapon against me. We apply for emergency guardianship first thing in the morning, Todd continued, a plan rapidly forming in his desperate mind. We get a court order. We freeze his assets. Once we have power of attorney, we can sell the house. We can tap his retirement accounts. We can pay S back. But what if he fights it? Rebecca asked. He can be stubborn. Let him fight it, Todd sneered. Who will the judge believe? A loving daughter recovering in a hospital bed from poison, or a senile old man who grows poison in his kitchen? We play the caring part. We act heartbroken. We tell the judge we're doing this to protect him. Put him in that place up north, Rebecca said. The one with high security, the one with the high walls. Exactly, Todd said. We lock him away so he can't hurt anyone, and then we take over the estate. It's clean. It's perfectly legal, and it solves the problem in 48 hours. I stepped away from the door. I'd heard enough. My blood ran cold, not with fear, but with a frigid, crystalline rage. They didn't just want to kill me. They wanted to erase me. They wanted to strip me of my rights, my name, my freedom. They wanted to use the law as a club to steal everything I'd built. I walked back to the waiting room, my mind racing. They thought they were playing chess, but they were still playing checkers. They thought I only had this house and a pension. They didn't know about the offshore accounts. They didn't know about the royalties from the patents. Most importantly, they didn't know I'd just activated a protocol that would turn their financial world into a wasteland before the sun rose. I sat back in the vinyl chair, resuming the posture of a sleeping, frail old man. Let them file their papers. Let them call their lawyers. They were about to find out that trying to trick a chemist is a profoundly dangerous game, because just as they were planning to lock me away, I was preparing to bring their entire lives crashing down. I closed my eyes and waited for dawn. Todd's 7-day countdown had begun, and mine was going to be much, much shorter. The heavy silence in the car ride back from the hospital was enough to crush a weak will, but I sat in the backseat, humming an off-key tune, watching the frozen Chicago streets slide by. Rebecca slumped in the passenger seat, her skin as colorless as damp ash, clearly not fully recovered from the poison. Every now and then, she glanced at me in the rearview mirror with a look of pure hatred, her eyes burning with a mix of nausea and malice. Todd gripped the steering wheel as if he wanted to choke it, his knuckles white, his jaw clenched silently. He was driving too fast, weaving through traffic with the desperation of a man who could hear his own life ticking away. We pulled into the driveway, the tires crunching over the snow I hadn't yet shoveled. The house looked dark and uninviting, like a stage set for a tragedy halfway through the second act. Todd helped Rebecca out of the car, supporting her weight as she shuffled toward the front door. I followed them, moving with exaggerated slowness, pulling my coat collar tight against the wind. The air inside the house was stale, faint with the smell of the pumpkin soup I'd poured down the drain. Todd settled Rebecca on the living room sofa, piling blankets on her until she looked like a miserable cocoon. I need water, she said, her voice sounding like sandpaper on stone. And food. My stomach is empty. I'll go to the store, Todd said, checking his watch. He glanced around the room nervously. I need to get things. Electrolyte drinks, crackers, maybe more soup. He turned to look at me. Don't touch her, he warned. Don't you dare go near the kitchen. I held up my hands in surrender, letting my lower lip tremble. I'm not going anywhere, Todd. I'm just sitting in my chair. I'm tired. Too tired. Todd grabbed his wallet and keys. I'll be back in 20 minutes, he told Rebecca. Then we'll deal with this. He slammed the door, the sound echoing through the house. I walked over to the leather armchair in the corner, the one facing the window and the sofa. I sat down and watched my daughter. She was staring at the ceiling, her breathing shallow. Why won't you just die? She whispered, not looking at me. It would make things so much easier. I didn't answer. I just watched her with watery, sad eyes while my mind calculated the distance to the grocery store and the exact moment Todd would be standing at the checkout. I could vividly imagine the scene. He would pile expensive recovery drinks, organic broth, and maybe a bottle of wine to soothe his nerves on the counter. He would watch the total climb. He would swipe his card, the platinum card linked to my primary account, the one I'd authorized him to use only in emergencies, but which he used for golf clubs. And then beep. Transaction declined. I checked the grandfather clock in the hallway. 10 minutes. He should be there by now. He should be trying the second card. The one I gave to Rebecca. Declined. He'll start to sweat. He'll try the debit card for household expenses. Declined, account frozen, flagged for suspicious activity. He'll be standing under the fluorescent lights, a long line of impatient customers behind him, realizing the plastic in his wallet is just a pile of scrap. He'll have to leave. He'll have to abandon the grocery bags. He'll have to walk back to the car with nothing. The humiliation will burn his cheeks, and he'll finally realize the well has run dry. It took him 40 minutes to get back. I heard the car screech into the driveway and the engine kill hard. The front door burst open, slamming into the wall so hard it tilted the picture frames. Todd stomped in. No grocery bags. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He looked like a man who had stared into the abyss and found it empty. You, he screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. Rebecca sat up in a panic. Todd, the food. Why didn't you get anything? Todd kicked the door shut. The cards didn't work. None of them. What? Rebecca asked, confused. What do you mean they didn't work? Declined, every single one. Insufficient funds. Issuer restrictions. I tried the credit card, the debit card, even the emergency backup. I stood there like a beggar. He marched to my chair, looming over me. I shrank back, pressing myself into the leather, doing my best to look smaller. What did you do? Todd hissed, spit flying. What did you do to the accounts? I blinked rapidly, looking up at him with wide, innocent eyes. The accounts, I stammered. Oh, yes, that's Leonard. Todd froze. Leonard, your lawyer, I nodded slowly. I called him from the hospital after the soup accident. I was so scared, Todd. The police kept asking questions. I felt so confused. So what? Todd snapped. What did you tell him? I told him my mind wasn't clear, I whispered, my voice shaking. I told him I couldn't trust myself anymore. I told him I almost hurt Becca because I couldn't tell the jars apart. I told him I needed protection. Protection? Rebecca's voice rose. Yes, I said. Leonard said. He said if I was starting to have dementia, I'd be vulnerable. He said predators love to target old men like me. He said I needed to lock everything down. He called it the Aegis Protocol. Todd looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. The Aegis Protocol. What the hell is that? I shrugged helplessly. I don't know the legal terms, Todd. He said he froze everything to keep me safe. He said until a judge reviews my case, no one can move a penny, not even me. He said if I wanted to buy a pack of gum, I'd need a court order. Absolute silence followed. The kind of silence after a bomb goes off, leaving only ringing ears and dust. You froze the money, Todd whispered, terror in his voice. All of it. To keep us safe, I said with a weak smile. So I wouldn't be swindled. Leonard said it was the responsible thing to do. You idiot, Todd screamed, grabbing his head. You senile old fool. Do you have any idea what you've done? I made the best choice, I said, my voice trembling. Leonard said, "Fuck Leonard," Todd roared. He spun around and kicked the coffee table, sending magazines flying. We need that money. We need it now. Why? I asked innocently. There's food in the pantry. We have a house. Why do we need money right now, Todd? He couldn't tell me. He couldn't tell me about about the fingers being cut off, about the 7-day ultimatum. He just stood there gasping, eyes frantic. Rebecca struggled to stand. Dad, call him back. Call Leonard, tell him to unfreeze it, tell him it's a mistake. I can't, I said sadly. He said this is a legal process now. Once the protocol is active, it takes weeks to reverse. He said it's for my own good. Weeks, Todd choked out. We don't have weeks. He looked at Rebecca. Panic was spreading, cold and hard. They realized the trap they'd set for me had just snapped on their own legs. They wanted conservatorship. They wanted to prove me incompetent. Well, I'd just given them exactly what they wanted. I was acting so incompetent that the law had stepped in to protect me from everyone, including them. Cash, Todd muttered. We need cash. There has to be cash in this house. He looked around, his eyes landing on the antique desk in the corner where I kept my mail. Where do you hide the money? He demanded. Emergency funds, stash money. Every old man has a stash. I don't. I usually use the bank, I stammered. Liar, Todd yelled. He ran to the desk and ripped the drawers open. He dumped everything on the floor. Papers, pens, old stamps. He searched frantically. Nothing. Check the bedroom, Rebecca shouted, adrenaline suppressing the toxins in her system. Under the mattress, in the closet. They went on a rampage. It was an absurd and terrifying scene. Todd ran upstairs, his heavy footsteps thumping overhead. I heard drawers being pulled out and thrown against the wall. I heard a lamp shatter. He was tearing my bedroom apart, looking for the bundles of cash he fantasized I was hoarding. Rebecca limped into the kitchen. I heard the crash of ceramic jars being overturned. She was checking cookie jars, the fridge, even behind loose bricks in the pantry. I sat in my chair. I didn't move. I listened to them destroy my home. I felt a strange calm. Let them look. Let them smash the furniture. They wouldn't find a dime. I'd moved the cash years ago. All they'd find was dust and their own desperation. A few minutes later, Todd came downstairs, red-faced and empty-handed. He was holding a small wooden box he'd found in my closet. It was my wife's jewelry box. This is it, he screamed, shaking the box. Costume jewelry. Where are the diamonds? Where is the gold? Your mother was buried with her rings, Todd, I said softly. You know that. He smashed the box across the room. It shattered against the fireplace and cheap beaded necklaces scattered across the hearth. We're done, he whispered. He looked at Rebecca. S isn't going to wait for a court order. What do we do? Rebecca asked, trembling. Todd looked at me. His eyes were black, filled with a malice that had moved past greed into something primal. Survival instinct. We accelerate, he said. We don't wait for the hearing. We put him in a psychiatric ward tonight. But the lawyer, Rebecca started. Forget the lawyer, Todd snapped. We'll pay a doctor a bit of cash to sign off. We'll put him in a psych ward. Once he's inside, we're automatically his legal guardians. We can bypass the lawyer. We can force the bank to unfreeze the accounts. He walked toward me, leaning down until his face was inches from mine. I could smell the sour stench of fear on his breath. You're sick, Harold, he said, his voice low and threatening. You're very, very sick. You're hallucinating. You're hurting people, and we're going to get you the help you need, even if we have to drag you there. I looked at him, blinking tears into my eyes, playing the terrified old man. But deep inside, I was smiling. They were desperate. They were reckless. They were about to commit the mistake that would send them to prison forever. "Okay, Todd," I whispered. "You're in charge." "Good," he straightened up. He pulled out his phone. "I know a guy, Dr. Evans. He lost his license, but he still has his prescription pad. He'll be here in an hour." He went into the kitchen to make the call. Rebecca slumped on the sofa, staring at me with cold, dead eyes. I leaned back in my chair and waited. Let them bring the fake doctor. Let them try to drag me away. I had one last card, hidden in the chemical compound I'd coated on the wall safe upstairs before I left for the hospital. The game was in the end game, and they didn't even know they were already in checkmate. It was 9 o'clock sharp when the doorbell rang. It wasn't a friendly sound. It felt more like a summons. I heard Todd's heavy footsteps rushing to the door, a brief, muffled conversation in the hallway, and then the distinct, wet cough of a heavy smoker. I didn't wait for them to come and get me. I moved to the landing and looked down. Todd was shaking hands with a man who looked like he'd been stitched together from the spare parts of decent people. Dr. Evans was tall, slightly hunched, and wearing a suit that might have been expensive a decade ago, but now shone at the elbows. He carried a battered leather medical bag that looked more like a prop than a tool for healing. His face was a roadmap of bad choices. Broken capillaries across his nose, a nervous twitch below his left eye, and a sheen of sweat that even the winter cold couldn't dry. Todd looked up and saw me. For a split second, he looked terrified, as if he expected me to be holding the fireplace poker or screaming about the safe. But I just gripped the railing with trembling hands and blinked slowly. "Good morning, Todd," I said, my voice perfectly raspy. "Who's your friend?" Todd exhaled, his shoulders dropping. He put on his concerned face, that mask he wore so easily. "This is Dr. Evans, Harold. He's a specialist. He's here to help us. To help you." I walked down the stairs, one step at a time, like a toddler. I stopped in front of the doctor. He smelled like mints trying to mask the scent of cheap bourbon. "A specialist?" I asked. "Are you here to treat the house?" Dr. Evans smiled, showing teeth yellowed from too much coffee. "I specialize in the mind, Mr. King. Your memory. Your son-in-law tells me you've been having some trouble distinguishing reality lately." I looked at Todd. He couldn't meet my eyes. "I'm fine," I said quietly. I get confused sometimes." "Shall we sit?" Evans asked, gesturing toward the living room as if it were his own office. We sat. Rebecca walked in from the kitchen with a cup of coffee. She didn't pour me one. She sat next to Todd, gripping his arm tightly, playing the part of the distraught daughter. Dr. Evans pulled a clipboard from his bag. He clicked his silver pen. "Let's start with the basics, Harold. Can you tell me what year it is?" I stared at him. It was a trap. If I got it wrong, I was unstable. If I got it right, he'd say I was guessing. "Is it 2024? I asked, keeping my tone uncertain. Evans scribbled something. He didn't look up. "And who is the President of the United States?" I answered correctly. He started writing again. "Harold, your family tells me you've been displaying aggressive behavior, violent tendencies. Is that true?" I looked at the fireplace where Todd had smashed my wife's jewelry box. I looked at the wall hiding the safe. "I don't like loud noises," I said softly. "They scare me." Evans nodded, scribbling furiously. "Paranoia, hypersensitivity. What about the soup?" Evans asked, his eyes locked on mine. "You poisoned your daughter, Harold. Do you know what you were doing? Were you hearing voices when you did it?" A cold, icy rage surged in my stomach. He wasn't diagnosing me. He was scripting a story. He was leading me to say exactly what he wanted. "I thought it was parsley," I mumbled, looking at my hands. Dr. Evans stopped writing. He leaned in. "Parsley doesn't come in a small blue glass vial, Harold." I froze. I looked up at him. How did he know about the bottle? Todd must have told him, thinking I used that specific bottle for the incident. But I had never mentioned a vial to the police. I had only ever said jar. You talked to Todd about the bottle, I asked, dropping the act of dementia for a split second. Evans blinked, realizing he'd slipped up. I was making an assumption. The point is, you added a foreign substance. He flipped a page on the clipboard. Let's do a cognitive test. I'm going to say 3 words. I want you to repeat them back to me in 5 minutes. Apple, table, penny. I watched him. I watched the beads of sweat on his upper lip. I watched his hand shaking slightly as he held the pen. Apple, table, penny, I repeated. We sat in silence. Todd tapped his foot. Rebecca chewed her lip. The clock ticked. 5 minutes passed. All right, Evans said. What were those 3 words? I stared at him blankly. What words? I asked. Todd let out a sigh of relief so loud it sounded like a tire deflating. Evans gave me a predatory smile. He wrote in block letters on the clipboard. I could see it clearly even from across the room. Severe cognitive decline. Imminent danger. He stood up. He didn't offer a handshake. He turned to Todd. It's worse than you described, he said with grave seriousness. He is completely detached. The memory loss is severe, accompanied by violent outbursts. In good conscience, I cannot recommend that he stay in this environment. Rebecca began to cry, fake dry sobs. Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry. What's the diagnosis? Todd asked, trying to hide the eagerness in his voice. Acute dementia with psychotic features, Evans announced. He tore the page from the clipboard and handed it to Todd. This is a recommendation for medical detention. He needs to go to a secure facility, somewhere that can manage his episodes. Todd took the paper. He looked at it like it was a winning lottery ticket. Thank you, doctor. We just want him safe. I stood up. I need to use the restroom, I said. Sit down, Harold, Todd barked. We aren't finished. The doorbell rang again. Todd checked his watch. That should be Mr. Sykes. Mr. Sykes, I asked. The social worker, Rebecca said, wiping her dry eyes. We called him to help with the transfer. Todd went to the door. He came back with a man who looked like a short, thick thumb in a cheap suit. Mr. Sykes was short and wide with the dead, fishy eyes of a bureaucrat who had sold his soul for a pension. He didn't look at the people in the room. He looked at the paperwork Todd shoved into his hands. Dr. Evans' report, Sykes asked in a monotone buzz. Right here, Todd said. Sykes scanned it. He nodded. For the first time he looked at me. He didn't see a person. He saw a file number. Mr. Harold King, he said. I'm an emergency social worker with Adult Protective Services. Based on the medical assessment provided by Dr. Evans and your family's sworn statement regarding the poisoning incident, the state is stepping in. Stepping in, I asked, my voice trembling. You are being placed under a temporary 5150 emergency psychiatric hold, Sykes said. You have been deemed an imminent danger to yourself and others. Hold, I stepped back. You're taking me away. We are transferring you to the Greenbrier Behavioral Health Center, Sykes said. There is a bed waiting for you. The transport team will be here in 5 minutes. Greenbrier, I knew that place. It was a warehouse for the discarded. They'd pump you full of sedatives until you forgot your own name, or until your family bled your accounts dry and stopped paying the bills. You can't do this, I whispered. This is my house. It's for your own good, Dad, Rebecca said, standing up. She walked over to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy, possessive. We can't take care of you anymore. You almost killed me. You need help. I looked at her. I saw the victory in her eyes. She thought she'd won. She thought the paper in Sykes' hand was checkmate. When I asked, when are they coming? Sykes checked his phone. The transport van is delayed due to the heavy snow. They won't be here for 24 hours. Until then, you are remanded to the custody of your son-in-law. You are not to leave this house. If you try to leave, we will call the police and you will be arrested. 24 hours. They'd given me a window, a countdown. Todd looked annoyed. Can't you take him now, Sykes? We don't feel safe. Rules are rules, Sykes shrugged. The bed doesn't open up until tomorrow morning. Just lock his door. Keep him contained. We'll be here at 8 sharp. Sykes handed Todd a carbon copy. It was a pink slip, the color of a termination notice. Keep this safe, Sykes said. It grants you temporary emergency guardianship until next week's court hearing. Todd took the paper. His hand was shaking, but this time it was from excitement. He had it. The golden ticket. With that paper, he could walk into the bank. He could talk to the mortgage company. He could call his creditors and tell them the money was coming. Sykes left. Evans left too, clutching an envelope of cash Todd had slipped him at the door. We were the only 3 left in the living room. The silence was so thick it felt electric. Todd looked at the paper. He kissed it. He actually kissed it. He looked at me, his face twisting into a sneer. "Go to your room, Harold," he said. I stood there for a moment. I looked him straight in the eyes. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to scream that the paper in his hand was actually his own arrest warrant, but I held back. The trap hadn't finished closing yet. I need my medication," I said weakly. Todd laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Where you're going, you won't need meds, old man. Greenbrier has plenty of juice for you. Now move." He grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the stairs. He shoved me up them. Rebecca watched from downstairs, arms crossed. "Don't forget to lock the door this time, Todd. Forget the safety hazard. Nail it shut if you have to." Todd shoved me back into the bedroom. I stumbled and hit the carpet. "Sleep tight, Harold," he said. "Enjoy the bed. It's your last night in it." He slammed the door. I heard the asterisk click asterisk of the bolt. They had put it back on while I was at the hospital. Then I heard the whine of a power drill. He was drilling a metal bracket into the frame. He was sealing me in. I lay on the floor for a while, listening to the buzzing of the drill. He was building a prison. I stood up and dusted off my knees. I walked to the window. The snow was coming down harder, like a white curtain erasing the world outside. 24 hours. I didn't need 24 hours. I only needed 20 minutes. I walked into the en-suite bathroom. I opened the cabinet under the sink. I pushed aside the toilet paper and cleaning supplies. Tucked in the back was a plastic jug of industrial-grade drain cleaner, highly concentrated sulfuric acid. I used it to clear stubborn clogs in this old house. I brought the jug to the bedroom door. I looked at the hinges. They'd been painted over with layers of white latex, but underneath was brass, a soft metal. Todd thought he'd locked me in. He thought steel and wood could hold a chemist. He forgot that metal dissolves. He forgot that wood burns. He forgot that I knew the melting point of every material in this house. I poured a small amount of the acid into a glass. I pulled a pipette from my emergency kit. I wasn't going to Greenbrier. I was going to the bank. Then I was going to the courthouse. But first, I had to melt a path to freedom. I placed the first drop of acid on the top hinge. It hissed. A plume of pungent smoke rose up. It smelled like victory. I worked quietly and methodically, drop by drop, weakening the structure of the frame, corroding the integrity of their cage. Downstairs, I heard the sound of a champagne cork popping. They were celebrating. They were drinking my wine, toasting their victory, counting money they would never touch. Let them drink. Let them celebrate. Tomorrow, when the transport van arrived, they would find nothing but a loose door and a chemical burn on the floor, and I would be gone forever from their lives. The doctor had signed that document, yes, but he'd used the pen I handed him during the memory test. The ink in that pen would fade to total invisibility within 12 hours. By the time they presented that paper to a judge, it would be a blank sheet. I added another drop. The hinge groaned, almost there. The scent of dissolving metal is unique. It's the bite of acid, tasting like copper pennies at the back of the tongue. In a well-ventilated lab, it's a warning. In a sealed bedroom at 2:00 a.m., it's the scent of freedom. I sat on the floor, back against the bed frame, watching the chemical reaction do the work my aging muscles couldn't. The sulfuric acid from the drain cleaner is a thick, heavy liquid. I carefully applied it with the glass dropper from my travel kit, soaking the wood around the screws of the heavy iron bracket Todd had drilled into the door frame. I wasn't trying to melt the steel bracket itself. That would have taken days. I was attacking the subfloor. I was destroying the wood that held the screws. When introducing highly molar corrosive agents, cellulose and lignin decompose rapidly. The wood hissed, bubbled, and turned into a charred, oily black mess. It was a slow, quiet violence, a silent erosion, exactly like the way my family had been gnawing away at my life for the past decade. Downstairs, the house was silent. The celebration had ended hours ago. I imagined Todd passed out on the sofa, clutching an empty bottle of high-end scotch, my scotch. I imagined Rebecca dreaming of shopping sprees once I was locked away in Greenbrier. They were sleeping soundly, enjoying the carefree slumber of the victors. They didn't hear their victory hissing into ashes. I checked my watch, 3:15 a.m. The transport was scheduled for 8:00. I had a 5-hour head start, provided I could get out before the snowplows started their morning rounds. I stood up and tested the bracket. I leaned my shoulder against the door. The wood groaned. It was soft, mushy, structurally compromised. I needed a sharp, decisive force. I wrapped a thick towel around my shoulder to muffle the sound. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the stagnant air of this prison. I thought of the soup. I thought of the little blue vial. I thought of the look on Todd's face when he said I wouldn't need my medicine anymore. I threw my full weight against the door. There was a wet, soft crunch, like a branch snapping in a storm. The screws pulled out of the dissolved wood, bringing huge chunks of black sludge with them. The door gave way. I didn't step out immediately. I stood frozen, listening. The house was settling. The refrigerator downstairs hummed. No footsteps, no shouting, just silence. I grabbed my emergency kit from under the floorboards. It was light and functional. I put on my heavy coat, hat, and gloves. I took one last look at the room. I looked at the bed where I'd slept for 30 years, the place where I'd mourned my wife, the place where I'd decided to save myself. I would never see this room again. Good. Now it was a crime scene. I stepped into the hallway. The floorboards were dangerous, prone to creaking, but I knew every inch of this house. I knew where to step. I hugged the walls, moving like a shadow. I reached the top of the stairs and looked down into the foyer. The streetlights outside cast long, skeletal shadows through the transom window. I walked down slowly, one hand hovering above the railing without touching it. I didn't want to leave more fingerprints than necessary, even though I knew the house was already dusted with the UV powder I'd scattered earlier. I reached the ground floor. The living room was to my left. I couldn't help myself. I crept to the doorway and looked in. Todd was indeed on the sofa, mouth open, snoring softly. Rebecca was curled up in an armchair, wrapped in a blanket. The air was heavy with the scent of alcohol and victory. On the coffee table, illuminated by the standby light of the television, lay the pink slip, the emergency guardianship document, the key that was supposed to lock me away. I walked to the table. My movements were ghost quiet. I reached out and picked up the paper. Dr. Evans' signature was at the bottom, written in the blue ink from the pen I'd lent him. I looked at it closely. The writing was already beginning to fade, the chemical composition of the ink reacting with the air, breaking down the pigments. By the time they showed this to a judge, it would be a blank page. A ghost document for a ghost prisoner. I placed the paper back on the table exactly where it had been. I wanted them to see it when they woke up. I wanted them to grab it in the morning, rush to the transport van, and hand over a scrap of nothing. I walked toward the back door. The front door was too loud, too exposed. The sliding glass door in the kitchen led to the garden, to the trellis I'd climbed earlier, and to the alleyway. I unlocked it. The mechanism made an asterisk click that sounded deafening in the quiet kitchen. Todd snorted in his sleep and rolled over. I froze. He mumbled something unintelligible and went quiet again. I pulled the sliding door open. The cold air hit me like a physical blow, a wall of ice and wind. With the wind chill, it was 20 degrees below zero. Chicago in February is no place for the elderly or the weak, but I wasn't weak. I stepped into the snow. I closed the door behind me. I was out. The wind tore at my coat, trying to push me back, but I lowered my head and kept moving. The snow was deep, drifted high against the fences. I waded through, my breath forming clouds of white fog in front of me. I reached the alley, the service road running behind the property. The snow had been shoveled, but it was icy. I hadn't taken the car. The garage door opener would have woken them. The engine would have been like a siren. I had to walk. I had to walk 2 miles to the 24-hour diner on the main road where I could call a car. The trek was a brutal physical ordeal. My knees throbbed. The cold seeped through my boots, numbing my toes. My face went numb. Every step was a fight against the instinct to just lie down, rest, and surrender to the freezing air. But I kept walking. I marched to the rhythm of my own rage. Left, right, left, right. They wanted me dead, asterisk left, right. They wanted my money, asterisk left, right. I reached the diner 40 minutes later. I was shivering uncontrollably, frost coating my eyebrows. I stumbled inside. When the warmth hit my frozen skin, it actually brought a sting of pain. The tired waitress with the gentle eyes looked up from behind the counter. "Honey, you look like you just walked out of a freezer," she said. "My car broke down," I lied, my teeth chattering. "Just need a coffee and a phone." I sat in a booth, drinking black coffee until my hands stopped shaking. I used the diner's landline to call a private car service, the kind Leonard used for high-end clients. No app, no tracking, cash only. The car arrived 10 minutes later, a black sedan that looked like a hearse but felt like a sanctuary. I climbed into the back seat. "Where to?" the driver asked. "The Loop," I said. "Banks and Associates law firm." I fell asleep in the car, a deep, dreamless darkness. I woke up when the driver tapped on the glass. We were parked in front of a steel and glass structure piercing the gray morning sky. 6 o'clock. The city was waking up. I paid the fare and walked into the lobby. The security guard knew me. Leonard had put me on the list. "Mr. King," he nodded. "Mr. Banks is expecting you." I took the elevator to the 45th floor. My ears were ringing. The elevator doors slid open, revealing a reception area that smelled of expensive leather and fresh espresso. Leonard was standing there. He wasn't wearing his usual suit jacket. His tie was loosened and his sleeves were rolled up. He looked like a general in a bunker. He walked over and gripped my hand. His handshake was firm, reassuring. "You made it out," he said. I pulled the emergency kit off my shoulder and dropped it on the floor. "I'm out," I said, "but the house isn't doing so well. I think I melted a door frame." Leonard smiled, a cold, tight expression. "A small price to pay, come in. The war room is ready." We walked into his corner office. The view of Lake Michigan was breathtaking, a vast, frozen expanse of gray water, but the real view was on the conference table. It was covered in documents, hard drives, and monitors. 2 junior associates were typing furiously on laptops. Leonard pulled out a chair for me. "Sit, eat, we have work to do." He pushed a plate of pastries and a cup of fresh coffee toward me. I devoured them. I hadn't realized how hungry I was. While I ate, Leonard briefed me. "The assets have been frozen," he said. "We received notification at 3:00 a.m. Todd tried to log into the Cayman accounts online. That tripped the trap. We got his IP address. We logged the login attempt." "Good," I said, wiping crumbs from my chin. "What about the doctor?" Leonard picked up a folder. Dr. Evans is disgraced, backed into a corner. We dug into his history. He has 3 pending medical malpractice lawsuits and a gambling debt as big as your son-in-law S. He didn't just sign those papers for cash. He signed them because Todd promised him a cut of the inheritance. We have the financial trail. And the hearing, I asked. Emergency session, Leonard said. 10:00 a.m. Your daughter filed the paperwork online an hour ago. She's claiming you have violent tendencies, delusions, and that you're missing. She's requesting immediate temporary custody of the estate to pay for your search and rescue. I laughed, a dry, rasping sound. Search and rescue. She's looking to pay off loan sharks. Exactly, Leonard said. He leaned in, placing his hands on the table. Here, that's how the play goes, Harold. We aren't just playing defense. We're going on offense. We aren't just showing up and saying you're of sound mind. We're walking in there and dropping the guillotine. I reached into my coat pocket. I pulled out the tissue containing the blue glass vial. I set it on the mahogany table. Test this, I said. There's 1 drop left. Leonard looked at the vial. He didn't touch it. Digitalis, he asked. Concentrated, I said. Homemade, crude, but lethal. Leonard nodded to one of the assistants. Bag it. Send it to the private lab. Rush delivery. I want the results by 9:30. He turned back to me. We have the financial motive. We have the forensic evidence of poisoning. We have the UV photos you sent me of their attempted robbery. We have the recording of the conspiracy to commit murder. Is that enough? I asked. Is it enough to put them away forever? Leonard looked out at the rising sun. Harold, by noon today, they won't just be broke. They'll be facing federal charges. Attempted murder is a state crime, but wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy, that brings in the FBI. Once we show the judge how they tried to use the court system as a weapon to commit murder. He turned to look at me, his gaze cold and hard. The judge will lock the doors himself and call the marshals. I leaned back in the leather chair. I felt the warmth of the coffee spreading through my chest. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't a target. I was the architect of their destruction. Let them go to court, I said quietly. Let them stand there and lie. I want to see the looks on their faces when I walk in. You will, Leonard said. You'll see it all. I closed my eyes for a moment, gathering my strength. The long night was over. The cold trek was over. Now it was time to light a fire. The thick oak doors of the Cook County Courthouse are designed to intimidate, to force a sense of solemnity and order. But as I stood on the other side of the threshold, adjusting my cuffs, I knew they were just wood. Things that could be broken, burned, or, in my case, easily pushed aside. I stood next to Leonard Banks, who watched his watch with the precision of a sniper waiting for a target to enter his crosshairs. It was 9:58 a.m. The emergency hearing had been going on for 18 minutes. We weren't late. We were timing it. Leonard wanted them to go all in. He wanted them to get it all on the court record. He wanted the stenographer to type every lie so that when the hammer fell, it would shatter them completely. I could hear the muffled sounds from inside through the gap in the doors. My daughter was speaking. Her voice was thin, trembling. It was a masterclass in the traumatized victim performance. He isn't the father I knew anymore, Your Honor, Rebecca sobbed. Hearing her cry would have broken my heart once. Now it just kept my pulse steady. It was like listening to a chemical reaction bubbling in a beaker, predictable, volatile, and ultimately controllable. He looked at me with such hatred. He poured the liquid into my soup and then he smiled. He watched me eat it, if my husband hadn't rushed me to the hospital. Her voice trailed off, leaving the silence to bear the weight. I could imagine how she looked in there. No makeup, probably wearing simple, slightly disheveled clothes to hint at her grief. She was performing to the hilt, even though the room was almost empty, save for the judge, the bailiff, and the court reporter. That was a heavy, intense journey, but you've crafted a gripping narrative of liberation and cold, precise justice. The way you transition from the claustrophobic tension of the courtroom to the open-ended freedom of the highway perfectly mirrors Harold's shift from victim to architect of his own fate. By discarding the SIM card and driving toward the horizon, you've provided a definitive conclusion to the toxic cycle he was trapped in. The contrast between the sterile, bleach-scented prison visit and the fresh, expansive interior of the new motorhome is a powerful final image of his autonomy. The structure of this story, from the slow-burn psychological manipulation to the explosive mic drop reveal in court, hits all the right beats for the engagement style you've been developing. Since you've reached the end of this series of events, is there a specific hook, or engagement strategy you want to focus on for the voiceover delivery of this final segment? Or are you planning to move on to a completely new narrative concept?